Hello everyone, I'm Harry. Today, I'll introduce to you a horror movie called Invisible Man. In the dark, Cecilia carefully took out a bottle of sleeping pills from under the bed. She whispered her boyfriend's name. Her boyfriend didn't reply to her, so she turned to leave. Before leaving, she came to the monitoring room. Except for the surveillance of her boyfriend's room, other monitoring and alarm systems had been shut down. Cecilia passed the garage. At this time, her dog followed. Seeing the electric collar on the pet dog's neck, she was a little impatient. She was going to take the thing off the dog's neck. Unexpectedly, she accidentally touched the car's anti-theft system. The sound of the alarm was deafening. She ran to the side of the road with a flashlight. Cecilia was in a hurry because the bedroom light was on. At this moment, Cecilia's sister, Emily, drove in. Cecilia just got on the passenger seat. Her boyfriend, Adrian, rushed over. He was very angry. One punch broke the window. Emily drove away quickly. Adrian also found sleeping pills on the ground. Cecilia temporarily lived with her good friend, James, but she was still worried that her boyfriend would come. He wouldn't let her go. That afternoon, Emily came to James' house. Cecilia told her before to never come here because she was afraid Adrian would follow her here. Emily seemed relaxed. She even told Cecilia surprising news. Her boyfriend Adrian had committed suicide. She showed Cecilia the news on her cell phone. Her boyfriend's suicide was reported on the news. Cecilia sat down on the sofa. She was finally free. Emily was curious. What did Adrian do that her sister seemed scared of him so much? After settling down, Cecilia told her that he kept controlling Cecilia. Once she didn't meet his requirements, she would be beaten. Cecilia didn't want to live like this, so she escaped. Cecilia received a letter. After opening the letter, she found out that this was a notification about the heir. After Adrian committed suicide, he left all his property to Cecilia. Cecilia came to the lawyer. The lawyer's name was Tom, Adrian's brother. Adrian's will was very simple. The $5 million in his name belonged to Cecilia. This money would be paid to her monthly, $100,000 per month. But in the meantime, she couldn't do anything criminal. Cecilia signed on the paper. At night, in Cecilia's account for James's daughter, she was paid $10,000. Sydney's wish was to go to an aristocratic school. With the money, she could finally fulfill her wish. The three of them opened a bottle of champagne and celebrated. The next day, Cecilia made breakfast and went to wake up Sydney. When she left, the gas switch on the stove was turned up. Fortunately, the two came back in time. The fire was put out with a fire extinguisher. In the evening, Cecilia and Sydney's quilt was pulled away. A dazzling flash woke Cecilia up. She was going to pick up the quilt, but she found something invisible stepping on the quilt. In panic, she called James and told him what she had just seen. James thought she might be dreaming and hallucinating. It would be over soon. The next day, Cecilia came to the design company for an interview. She wanted to welcome a new life, but during the conversation, she suddenly fainted to the ground. After hearing the news, James hurried to the hospital. The result was Cecilia took an overdose of sleeping pills, resulting in temporary syncope. However, Cecilia hadn't taken sleeping pills these days. She felt very strange. Thinking of the strange things these days, she was a bit scared. After getting home, Cecilia took a shower. A bottle of sleeping pills was found by the sink. There were a few drops of blood on it. That should be the medicine that fell that night and her boyfriend had picked it up, but how did it appear here? After that, Cecilia angrily found Adrian's brother, Tom. She told Tom to tell Adrian to stop making trouble because she knew that he wasn't dead yet. Perhaps, he had developed a technology that could turn himself invisible. In this way, the strange things around Cecilia could be explained. Tom said he saw Adrian's dead body with his own eyes. There was no conspiracy about his brother's death. Besides, he didn't have to lie to her. In the evening, Cecilia came to Emily's house. She was going to tell her about it. Emily was impatient. She said she finally knew how much her sister hated her. Cecilia didn't understand what she was talking about. Emily said angrily, "You sent me an email this morning. Why you forget it so soon?" Emily also repeated what was in the email. Cecilia said she had never sent such an email. Someone must have hacked into her mailbox. When she got home, she turned on the laptop. Sure enough, there was an email to her sister in her mailbox. The content was terrible. It was both abusing and ridiculing. She lied on the ground in pain. She still couldn't escape Adrian's claws. Why did he torture her so much? Sydney came into the house. She wanted to comfort her, but suddenly, someone slapped her. Sydney called her father, but James didn't listen to Cecilia's explanation at all. He thought she had been abnormal lately. Cecilia was desperate. She said to the heir, "You're so rich. Why don't you find another girl? Why haunt me?" Then an idea came into her mind. She called Adrian on the phone and his ringtone came from the roof. She moved the ladder up to the attic. Sure enough, she found his cell phone on the floor. Cecilia was surprised to find that there were more up there, photos of her sleeping. A text message came. It said, "Surprise." Was he by her side? At that moment, she picked up a bucket of paint and threw it downstairs. A figure appeared at the edge of the stairs, but it soon disappeared. Cecilia came to the kitchen according to the footprints of the paint. Suddenly, someone held her neck and lifted her up, throwing her against the wall. Fortunately, Cecilia had a quick observation. She took a plate and hit him. Then she hurried out of the room and called an online taxi to come to Adrian's villa. She must find evidence that he was still alive, so everyone would believe her. Cecilia came to the villa. After entering the code that opened the glass door, she saw the invisibility cloak on the hanger. Was this the result of Adrian's research? The pet dog suddenly barked. Cecilia took the invisibility cloak and hid away. The clever Adrian soon found her hiding place. He opened the door slowly, but Cecilia knocked him to the ground. She hurried to hail a cab to leave this place. Cecilia called Emily, saying she had found evidence that Adrian was still alive. The two made an appointment in the restaurant. Cecilia said she found the invisibility cloak invented by her boyfriend, but she hadn't finished yet. A knife pierced into Emily's neck, then it landed on Cecilia's hand. Everyone thought she killed her sister. Cecilia was sent to a mental hospital. The hospital also found James. They wanted to know if Cecilia had mental problems through him. Now Cecilia couldn't tell James the truth because she was afraid Adrian was eavesdropping around. James blamed himself for not taking good care of Cecilia. In the following days, the hospital gave her a general examination. The results surprised Cecilia. She was pregnant, but she had taken contraceptive measures. Adrian used to be a control freak. He knew she was taking birth control pills, so he secretly changed the pills she took every day. Soon after, Tom heard the news and came to the hospital. He told Cecilia she might no longer inherit Adrian's legacy unless the baby was born and returned to Adrian. Tom took out the phone and asked her to talk to Adrian. So, Tom knew that his brother was still alive. The collapsing Cecilia drove him away. At this time, the weather was broadcast on TV. There would be heavy rain in the evening. After reading the weather forecast, Cecilia secretly hid the pen in her sleeve. She had a plan. After returning to the ward, she took out her pen, preparing to self-harm, trying to lure Adrian out. Sure enough, Adrian suddenly appeared to stop her. Cecilia pierced the pen into his body. She kept attacking him. At this time, the function of the invisibility cloak was also destroyed. Adrian appeared in front of her. Flustered, he knocked down the security guard and ran out of the hospital. Cecilia got a gun, ready to shoot him. Then Adrian subdued Cecilia. He held Cecilia on the neck, but he didn't hurt her because the best way to hurt her was to make her lose the most important ones. Emily was dead. Next was James' family. Adrian was going to attack James' family. Cecilia also drove to James' house with a pistol. She quickly called James to explain the situation, telling him to leave quickly. On the other side, on the run, Jamie got into a fight with Adrian. Because James couldn't see Adrian, he was badly beaten up. Luckily, Cecilia got home in time. She waved a fire extinguisher, then shot Adrian with a gun. When Cecilia took off his mask, she found that the invisible man was not Adrian. It was his brother Tom. On the other side, the police found Adrian in the basement. It turned out that all this was planned by Tom. He intended to take his brother's property, but Cecilia disagreed. She thought Adrian was behind it. He planned it perfectly, then blamed it on his brother. To find out the truth, Cecilia decided to return to Adrian's home. The two had dinner at the table. Adrian was excited because Cecilia was pregnant with twins. He was finally saved. The camera in the corner recorded all this. Cecilia said the two must be honest with each other. Only in this way could they live happily. Adrian said he was also a victim. It was his brother who wanted his money and finished his research. However, Cecilia still didn't believe him. She pretended to go to the bathroom. In fact, she put on another invisibility cloak. She sneaked up behind Adrian and controlled him, pretending to cut his throat. Then she went back to the bathroom and took off the invisibility cloak. In front of the kitchen, she pretended to collapse, kneeling on the ground and crying helplessly while making an alarm call. After hanging up the phone, she disappeared into the camera. Her expression suddenly changed. She also said to Adrian, "Surprise." James on the other side heard on the monitor there was an alarm sound. He rushed into the villa. He met Cecilia with her luggage. James saw the invisibility cloak in her bag. He seemed to understand it all. Cecilia didn't want to make Adrian tell the truth but to kill him. At the end of the movie, Cecilia asked James what that scene was like. James replied, like he killed himself. Hearing this, Cecilia was very satisfied. She left the villa with a smile. End of the movie. There is no horror in the whole film. There is no particularly ruthless or bloody scene, but the character in the invisibility cloak slowly makes people feel the mysterious atmosphere. In fact, the most terrible thing in the world is not ghosts. It's people's hearts. Well, that's all for today. I'm Harry. I'll see you next time.